when I started looking at the Australian markets in residential, I thought, why are people buying residential properties at like 3 and 4%? Ouch! That's I just couldn't get my head around it. And I sat back and thought about it. And I thought, well, what else have I been doing? Commercial. Let me go and have a look at commercial and see what it's doing. And it was like, wow, commercial at 7% and 8%, depending on where you're buying, it's a no-brainer. So that's why I plowed head first right into commercial. You know, I was keeping quite quiet about it and just going on with my thing. But I literally had replaced my income and almost doubled it within 1 year of investing on the right types of properties.
Welcome to Get Invested on the Property Hub podcast channel, the leading weekly show to help you unlock your full self, health and wealth potential. I'm your host, Bushy Martin, and each week I go deep with the best investors, experts, leaders and founders to find out what it takes to break free from the grind, discover freedom and live by design. Subscribe now and join me and get invested in the life you really want. Let's get started.
Hi, freedom fighters. How would you feel if you'd spent your lifetime building and investing in your future, and overnight you pretty much lose everything and move to a foreign country to start again from scratch? How disheartened and defeated would you feel? How would you handle it? Would you give up and give in under the overwhelming pressure, or would you rise to the challenge, take it in your stride and do it all over again? How would you overcome the pain and hurt of losing it all and starting again with nothing from the ground up? What qualities would you need to demonstrate to not only survive, but to thrive in these confronting and challenging circumstances? It's a common theme that I've constantly explored over the years and continue to do so, because it's these character traits and qualities that separate the best investors from the rest, and the ones that we all need to model and inculcate if we're going to be able to achieve any form of sustainable success, however you choose to define it. So to put some further shape around this, let's have a very quick look at some great examples of other people who have managed to go from rags to riches, back to rags, and then back to bigger riches. Phew, try saying that 10 times over. Now, one of the most notable of those that have gone to hell and back financially is one of America's greatest presidents, Abraham Lincoln, who managed to hold together and unite what was to become the US of A during the divisive times of their Civil War. What you may not know is that in his early life as a storekeeper, he ended up going broke, and it took him over 17 years to repay his creditors. And along the way, he ran for office and failed over 9 times over 28 years before his indefatigable, never-give-up spirit resulted in him becoming president in 1860. And just an aside, I think he's a far better role model than the current real estate entrepreneur and rerunning ex-President Donald Trump, who's declared bankruptcy on his businesses 6 times to date and counting. And then there's the continuing story of American radio personality and financial advisor Dave Ramsey of the Dave Ramsey Show fame that I've often listened to in the past in my early days, who built today's equivalent of an $11.6 million real estate portfolio by the age of 26 way back in the 1980s, but was forced to file for bankruptcy in 1988 when creditors called in debts against the heavily leveraged properties. But did he give up? No, because after he dusted himself off, he started providing financial counselling to couples in his church, which led him into radio, where he then created the Dave Ramsey Show, and rolling forward to today, he now enjoys a net worth of over $200 million, where he uses his Ramsey Solutions platform to help others out of bankruptcy and debt. Now, turning to the music arena, there's also the story of one of my favourite evergreen performers, Elton John, who's one of the most successful artists of all time, and has sold over 300 million records over his 50-plus record career as one of the longest-lasting musical talents in history. But Elton's renowned for his lavish lifestyle, and after incurring huge debts on properties he owned all over the world, and going on a 2-year spending spree where he spent over $2 million a month, he declared bankruptcy back in 2002. But you can't keep a good person down, and he's managed to turn things around and now enjoys a net worth of over $650 million. And Elton is but one of a long line of musicians who've made it big, gone bust, and then made it back again, including MC Hammer, You Can't Touch This Fame, 50 Cent and Willie Nelson. Other famous broke-to-bounce-back players include Walt Disney, who accumulated over $5 billion in wealth by the time he died in 1966, along with the timeless author and father of American literature, Mark Twain, whose bankruptcy actually spurred him to write his greatest books. And these are just to name a few. So as you can see, after suffering my own early life crisis in my early 30s, I've been intrigued by those who managed to rise from the ashes like a phoenix, and I've studied them so I could model and replicate the traits that these sustainable high performers possess that separate them from the rest. But my real answers came much closer to home when I met and came to know, love and respect my wife Sonia's father, George, whose endless energy, curiosity, love and passion for life was really infectious as he navigated the highs and lows of his life's journey before he sadly passed away a few years ago, leaving a massive legacy. You see, George successfully escaped from his homeland of Hungary during the Russian Revolution back in the late 1950s. He arrived here in Australia with nothing but a suitcase to his name and 4 kids in tow and a very limited command of English. Starting as a dish and washer at a refugee kitchen, he started and worked hard enough to open his first fish and chip shop that led into owning and running restaurants, nightclubs, gyms, chicken farms, and a wholesale supermarket to feed his growing gaggle of 10 kids before getting into real estate and owning multi-storey unit towers on the Gold Coast. And along the way, he ended up going bankrupt twice. Now, this will be the end of most people, but each time he just dusted himself off, he'd learn the lessons of how not to do the same thing next time round, and then he'd just go hard again. He lived by the motto that you'll never know if you don't have a go, and he never died wondering. He had the most fearless and limitless energetic approach to life of anyone I've ever met, and his demeanour was infectious to anyone who had the pleasure of his company, as he quickly became inspirational to me at a time when I was just starting out again with nothing in my early 30s. Now, can't and no were never in his vocabulary, and everything was always, how can we, how are we going to, yes we can. He preferred to ask for forgiveness rather than permission. He would just seize on a good idea and put it into action without thinking about it too much. A bit like jumping off a cliff and then building your wings and learning to fly on the way down. He'd always say, what's the worst thing that can happen? I can only die, so what have we got to lose? Because we've only got one shot at life, so let's make it a good one. And I'll always remember him when someone would say to him, and they'd come and say, I've got a problem, George. And he'd respond, well, did someone die? When they'd say no, he'd say, well, we don't have a problem then, we've just got a challenge to overcome. He certainly didn't die with any of the regrets that I see many struggle with when they look back and reflect on their lives and they think, if only. Now, it's fair to say that without his living example and the inspiration and motivation that he gave me, Sonia and I wouldn't be enjoying the life that we're privileged to lead today. Now, if we join the dots between all of these examples, the common threads that make all of them stand out is their indefatigable, never-say-die spirit and underlying sense of self-belief and confidence in themselves, their abilities, and the positive opportunities that are available in the world. And they make things happen, not let things happen. They swim against the tide of common opinion and always find a way when no way can be seen, through their adaptability and action orientation, combined with the resilience, patience, and persistence to try something new and then stick at it until the results come. They're free, creative thinkers who don't care much about what others think of them or what they're doing because they know where they're going and they're hell-bent on getting there. And they see what most others perceive as failure as just stopping points. And they see them as learning experiences and stepping stones. And I'm glad your dog agrees here, Mish, because they're always hell-bent on making things better and hardening their resolve to do it differently and keep going. Because you can take away someone's financial and material possessions, but you can't take away their accumulated knowledge, skills, experience, and expertise, which can go on to achieve great things again if they're fired by the crucible of self-belief, along with their positive and persistent ways of thinking, acting, and doing. So what about you? Because the other key point here is who you are and where you are today isn't set in stone. You can change your beliefs, thinking, behaviours, actions, situations, and circumstances by emulating the examples of those that have gone before you. And over time, through constant repetition, turn them into happy habits that are going to transform your life. It won't be quick and it won't be easy. And you won't see immediate results because growth capitalises incrementally and exponentially just like the law of compounding returns. And it's not where you are now, but where you're heading that matters. So what are you waiting for? And if you're looking for another great example of resilience and indomitable spirit in action to inspire and motivate you to overcome what most would consider an unsurmountable challenge, then you're in for a real treat with today's special guest, Mish Daniel. Because it takes a special kind of grit to build a business and a property empire in another country and then be forced to walk away from it all and start again. And this is exactly what Mish has done. As you're about to hear, her story is extraordinary. She walked away from her clothing manufacturing business, including 3 factories and over 400 staff, along with her 29 property assets. And after joining us here in Australia just over 10 years ago, has managed to replace her income by investing in commercial property and has founded Revolve Commercial Buyers Agency to help you do the same. So I'm really looking forward to deep diving on this incredible story. So welcome, and let's get invested, Mish.
Thank you, Bushy. That's one heck of an introduction. Thank you very much.
Well, yeah,
great to be.
I think you're really, when I look at it, and having done a little bit of homework on you before we got together today, Mish, I was really inspired by what you've done and what you continue to do, and it always sort of sends me back to some of those role models that I used to echo many years ago. But I've only just scratched the surface here. So I guess what I'd like to do before we start really is to get you to tell us in particular what you do differently and why do you do what you do, Mish?
Okay, so currently what I do differently is, and I kind of stumbled upon this by accident, and that was around about 8 to 9 years ago, when I moved to Australia. I thought, well, I can only do what I know what to do, and there's no ways that I was going to start manufacturing in this country. It's just way too hard and too expensive. So I thought, well, the other thing that I'd been doing all my life was investing in real estate, doing uplift properties, and seeing if I could do the same. So I thought, well, that's a no-brainer. That's where I'm going. And when I started looking at the Australian markets in residential, I thought, why are people buying residential properties at like 3 and 4%? Ouch! That's I just couldn't get my head around it. Anyway, we bought one home, which was basically to fit the family in, and I sat back and thought about it. And I thought, well, what else have I been doing? Commercial. Let me go and have a look at commercial and see what it's doing. And it was like, wow, commercial at 7% and 8%, depending on where you're buying. It's a no-brainer. So that's why I plowed head first right into commercial. Had to do a lot of work around it because things are very different in every country, as you can imagine. Yeah. And within about a year, people said to me, geez, what are you doing? I mean, how have you got to where you are? And I don't really talk about what I'm doing in the background. I was keeping quite quiet about it and just going on with my thing. But I literally had replaced my income and almost doubled it within 1 year of investing on the right types of properties back 8 years ago. Yep. And people were saying, Mish, we want to know more. We want to know how you did that and what you did. And out of that was born the pre-run of Revolve Commercial.
Brilliant. Well, look, what I'd love to do is wind the clock back a bit now if we can and almost get you to give, because as I say, I've just scratched the surface on what you've achieved over your life so far. But I'd love it for you to sort of give us a bit of a run through on where you've invested your time, energy and money over the years and why, and how this has then led you to, one, end up in Australia and then to be where you are and what you're doing now.
Okay, well, pretty much in a nutshell, I mean, I started off, my parents were very average. My mother was a machinist, a dressmaker. My father worked for the South African Railways, which is not a very high-paying job. And he had 1 or 2 properties here and there. He'd kind of dabbled in them and sold them, and they didn't do too well. And by the time I was about 18 or 19, I started working, incidentally, at the age of 12. I worked in the shoe shop. And I was the runner. So I would deliver the shoes to the salespeople. And the one day the sales lady wasn't there, and I delivered the shoes. And I thought, well, what the heck? Let me explain to the lady about the shoe. And I ended up selling the shoe. And the owner saw me doing this and said, "You're in sales now." So, so I started that too, and I loved it. I really loved it. And I love talking to people. I'm passionate about finding out about people and how I can help them. And I continued my career, obviously not in the shoe shop, but from there I went to other, part-time jobs while I was at school. And by the time I got to 18, 19, I thought there's got to be something better in life. And everybody said, yeah, you got to do a little investment here and there. I bought unit trusts. And at the age of 20, I looked at those unit trusts and I thought, wow, I've put about 50,000 in and it's worth nothing. It's worth barely 50,000. So I had a look at the statements. I thought, where are the unit trusts investing? And I saw, property. I said, right, I am going to duplicate what they're doing on small scale, and I'm going to build up my own portfolio. So I went on a mission. I had already started my own business in manufacturing, and it was tiny. I started in a little office that was 2 meters by 3 meters, and it's a very passionate type of business. It's very creative. So I grew that business, and while I was growing that business, I made a commitment to myself that I would buy property every single year. I bought about 14 residential properties, and then I thought, hang on, commercial. I'm in commercial. Let's have a look at this. And a mate of mine, I had coffee with a mate of mine, and he said, Mish, I'm earning 11%. And I thought, ooh, in commercial, I'm doing it. So I went off and I bought 2 commercial warehouses that year. And every single cent that I was making in manufacturing, I was plowing into properties all over the place.
Well, I just want to jump in there because there's a couple of what I'm picking up already right from a very early age. There's a level of self-confidence there. One that allowed you to say, right, I'm going to start my own business, which not many do at that age. And secondly, there's obviously a passion for investing, even though it was unit trust to start with. I'd like to understand, where did that interest come from? Is that something that you picked up from your folks? It doesn't sound like it, given what you've just very briefly described. Can you talk me through where that interest came from and then why you went down that path?
That's a very interesting question, Bushy. I'm the last of 5 children in our family. So the first 3 children were the ones that my parents focused most on. The last 2 we sort of just learned by ear. And my father used to spend time with my oldest sister talking about shares and investment, and I used to hang around and just listen to this in the background. When I asked, they said, "Oh, go away," like the usual. And by the time I finished school, I had a look at what was happening around me, and I thought the status in the country had shifted. The country was at war, and I thought there's no ways that anybody's ever going to look after me, so I better start looking after myself. And that is why I decided, well, what are other people doing? How can I look after myself? And I really wanted to make sure that I had a financial nest egg. And I had this dream in mind that I had this incredibly ostentatious dream that I was going to build the biggest factory, and I was going to have the biggest jeans collection and T-shirt collection and shirt collection. I just wanted this, it was a dream. And I used to write about it, and I used to draw loads of little pictures about it. So it was kind of already there as a kid. And when I got to my early 20s, I had a couple of bumps along the way. I worked for somebody, and that didn't really work out. And I thought, why am I doing this for somebody? I'm going to do this for myself. And I got the opportunity. I thought, well, there we go. All I need is an office, a bunch of samples, and let me get out there and start doing it. So it kind of was that almost fortunate in a way that I was in a situation where I realized that nobody's going to be looking after me. I need to look after myself.
Well, what I'm also hearing though, Mish, is that creative spark, that ability to visualize early and get clear on. It's not many people do. A lot of people sort of stumble and bumble along. What I'm picking up from you is that you had a very clear vision right from early, and you're actually putting it on paper. You're drawing it, and you're bringing that to life. So, as a magnet and a compass, that was starting to guide you clearly from a very early age, and I think it's especially exceptional given from the little bit you've shared, your parents and perhaps your other siblings weren't entrepreneurial in that respect at all, either in their own business or in the property investment arena. Am I right in saying that?
On and off, my father kind of pulled back from being an entrepreneur. He had a couple of bumps and kind of went back into his shell and never went back into it, which I think was a terrible mistake, because I think he would have done well had he gone back into it after his bumps and scrapes. Yeah. And I had one or two siblings that they were a little bit slower than me, I would say, in coming in and coming out of their shell and moving into the great big world and establishing themselves. So I do have one sibling now who runs his own business, but all the others went into various different fields. So, yeah, I had this driving force that was kind of just within me. It was a passion, and I guess the passion was the passion was more that I wanted the huge clothing collection. Very basic. And I decided, well, that's what I'm going to do. And there was no promotional clothing at that stage in the country. We were one of the first. So when I started doing that, and bearing in mind my mother was a dressmaker, so she forced me to learn how to use a machine. But here's a little truth fact for you. I'm a terrible machinist.
That's probably a good thing, because if you're any good at it, you might be stuck to it still. So there's something else that I think is interesting in all of that, and again, I don't know a lot about South Africa, but my perception, and again, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I get the sense, I've only read Wilbur Smith books and all that sort of stuff in the past to get a sense of the country, but I get a sense it's quite a male-dominated, authoritarian, fairly hierarchical type of environment, and I might be completely misreading this. This might be a colonial hangover that doesn't exist anymore. But again, for a female in that environment who's young and building business and investing in properties, I would have thought that was rather the exception than the rule. Can you talk to me a bit about that?
Most certainly. When we're going 37 years back now, I'm giving my age away. When I started out, and it was most certainly, there was a huge barrier. In fact, when I developed the factory, I had the factory probably for about 10 years, and I had a couple of collaborative, let's call them partners, friends, a bunch of blokes, and they used to go out for lunch once a month on a Friday afternoon. They always used to say, Mish, come and join us, and they all used to get as drunk as skunks and fall over all over the place. And there were 11 of them and one of me. And that was the ratio, literally, And I just muscled in, and I got in with them, and I spoke the bloke language. I used to slap them around and push them over. And and the one fella came to me the one day and he said to me, Mish, I need to talk to you. What are you giving your staff that they won't leave you? And I said, what are you talking about, Dave? He said, I've been headhunting your management staff for the last 5 years, and they won't leave. What are you giving them? It's not money. What is it? And I looked at him, I had a big old grin on my face, and I said, mate, the difference between you and me is I respect the people who work for me, with me. I treat them like human beings and like people. You treat them like slaves. They'll never work for you.
Yeah. Well, that's...
So, 100%. I mean, I had a handful of those guys and we did a lot of business together, and they brought me in as one of theirs, So
talk to me about it. I mean, I touched on this in the introduction. There's a certain level of self-belief and self-confidence and an ability to back yourself in in quite challenging circumstances that is quite rare. Is that something that is nature, is nurture, a combination of both? Well, where did that come from, Mish?
Look, I think for me it was very much nature. I had a lot of hard bangs, hard, rough rides. I was bullied horrendously, being the last child of 5. And, I was bullied by the sisters as well as the brothers. And by the time I got to my teenage years, I thought, no more. I'm going to get out there and I'm going to go and make it happen. So what happened is I was brought up in Johannesburg, born in Durban. My parents moved to Johannesburg. I was schooled in Johannesburg. I hated the place. And the day I turned 19, I said, I've had enough. I'm not going to be here anymore. I packed my little bag and I shipped myself down to Cape Town, which is one of the most beautiful cities in the world. And I pretty much left the whole family behind because I kind of felt as if the family was holding me back. Yep. I moved to a new city. I had nothing. I virtually didn't have enough money to put fuel in my car. I used to park my car and walk because I just couldn't afford it. Yep. And it was like a weight off my shoulders. It was like my life is just beginning. I am choosing to be in this city and I am going to start all over again. And I start fresh and clean, knew nobody, and just got in there and plowed my way through and connected with as many people as possible. And I guess I got lucky. People liked me, They used to give me opportunities and I just organically started this little business that grew into, as you said, 3 factories, 400 people. And it grew into one of the bigger promotional clothing companies, most certainly in the south of the country. It was an organic process. And to be quite honest with you, Bushy, I was just doing what I loved doing. Yeah. And I love working with people. I love giving people opportunity. A lot of probably about 80% of my team were ladies, and they were breadwinners, in very unfortunate situations. And I used to bring them in. I used to say, well, let me see, what can you do? Show me your skills. I can use you in the cutting department, or I can use you in the planning department, or in the factory shop, or wherever. And I would watch and observe their growth, and I would move them in. I've got some beautiful stories. One day, I had a 17-year-old girl who was being ransomed by the drug lords, and her auntie worked for me, and I took her in, and we gave her shelter. And this poor little girl, she was so scared, she'd never look at me. She'd always walk down with her head down. And she was too scared to even say hello. And the one day we ran into a bit of a problem in the accounts department. And I said, who can help us? I need somebody who knows their ABCs and their 1, 2, 3s. Who? And they said, actually, that little girl, her name was Asa. I said, no ways. They said, yep. She's finished school and she knows her ABCs. I said, get her in here fast. Long story short, we trained her, put her through. Within 3 years, she was running the accounts department. She went on to do her CA. Today, she's an accountant and she runs 3 businesses.
Yeah, I love the opportunity that you're creating for others amongst that. What I'd love to get your thoughts on now, because to build up a manufacturing business of that size, 400 odd employees across 3 sites, and have 28 or 29 property assets in tow as well, that doesn't leave a lot of time for sleep, Mish, I'm guessing. I'd love to get your thoughts on how personally draining and how much commitment you had to that, and were there any burnout periods along that journey? And I know from having listened to some of the other stuff, you had some pretty big trials and tribulations through that before you made the decision to come to Australia. So can you talk to us a bit about that, and then we'll start to talk about why you came to Australia, and then we'll resume the commercial property discussion from there.
Sure. Okay. So just dialing it back, yes, very big burnouts. I used to work on average probably about 18 hours a day. What I did learn very fast is to teach and to grow and to get management in place. So I very quickly took these people who were within the company in the right places, and started teaching them very subtly management skills so that they would run various different departments, and then they would be answerable to me. So I ran the factory a very tight ship. We would have a production meeting every single day, so I'd have my managers every single day. And the amazing thing is, when you're manufacturing, it's almost like manufacturing a home. You have to have your patterns, your design, your design, your patterns, your materials, all of that. And it's exactly the same. So when I started buying properties, I was 22 years old when I started buying properties. Every single property I used to buy, I used to do a renovation to. I have a recipe in my residentials. Yep. I would buy properties that had certain flow so that I could open them up, make them open plan, and give them that beautiful feeling. People would walk in and go, "Oh, this is great." But that was me just removing walls and fixing and whatever. And the funny thing was, I would send my driver off to go and buy fabrics and buttons and zips and for the clothing manufacturing. He'd come back to the factory at about 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and then I'd say to him, "Okay, now go and buy lintels and cement and concrete and bricks." And I would, and he'd go and do that. And I would tell him to go and deliver it at that site. And he'd say to me, "But I don't know the site." I said, "Just go and deliver it there." And I'd have a builder there on site ready to go. The materials would arrive. So I was running production in clothing, and I was running production in building and renovating at the same time. So that's how I managed to continue to build the property while I was busy manufacturing. And everything, like I said, from manufacturing went into the properties. And that's basically how we went there. Wow. Trials and tribulation. Whew. South Africa, I always say, I kind of feel as if I lived through the war, because 17 years ago, I got a phone call. I just got home, and I got a phone call to say that my factory was burning down, and this was my primary factory. And I thought, nah, that's strange. Anyway, and I hopped into the car, and I shot down there, and triz nuts, somebody had broken into the factory next door and had used some paper and lit newspaper to illuminate their way around. It had burnt through that factory into my factory, and my factory was probably 22 meters of flames. Now think about this. The machines are all oil, the materials all nylon, and we had wooden pallets and plastic all over the place. The fire burnt for 3 days. We couldn't get in there. And I stood there hopelessly. I can still feel the goosebumps on my body. I still have photographs in my mind of how high that flame was, 3 times higher than the roof itself. It burned for 3 days. They had 11 fire trucks, and they could not extinguish it. You know, with the oil and the nylon, it was just a bonfire of note. Long story short, I was doing one of my biggest contracts ever. I had just been given the contract to do 22,000 garments. I'm thinking of the value over there. 22,000 garments for Caltex National.
Wow.
So the whole of Caltex National, they were one of the big 4 fuel stations. And there were about 20 garments per person that we had to manufacture. And I thought, I've lost it. I've lost the business. I've lost the building. I've lost the factories. How am I going to do this? I was sleepless nights. You can imagine. And I was there every single day, and I was just watching these flames. It was just, I didn't know what to do. Anyway, long story short, I thought the only thing that I can do is stop the fabric wherever it is. Fortunately, we had all the patterns on digital patterns. I outsourced. I phoned every single factory that I knew that was close by to find out how busy they were, what their capacity was, and to see whether I could restructure my business to outsource. We moved all my staff into those factories. I worked collaboratively with those factories, and we delivered that production 45 days later on time.
Unbelievable.
gives me goosebumps when I think about it. I can't actually believe that I managed it. I cannot believe that I did it, but we made it happen.
Incredible. Again, most people would roll over at that point. They go, "That's it, I'm done," because you put countless hours, blood, sweat, and tears into building that, to see it burn in front of your eyes and potentially lose big contracts and see the business fold as a result. That resilience and the creativity again, because someone would go, "Oh, that's it, I'm done," whereas you're going, "Right, how am I going to do it? What are we going to do to make it happen?" Is that just something that's inbuilt inside you? It must be.
There is, you know what? After that, people gave me a little nickname. They used to call me Pitbull Terrier because you know the Pitbull Terrier gets lockjaw and will never let go. And they said, "Mish, how did you do that?" And I said, "I don't know. I just knew that I had to do it. I just had to do it, and I was going to do it." I focused 100% on what the mission was, because Bushy, had I not done that, I would have been flat broke. It would have taken me out completely. I had leveraged off every single property and every single cent I had. My family would have been on the streets. And I thought, there's no ways I'm going to fail. I'm going to make this happen. And you know what the most amazing thing is? I was the first person to start subcontracting and to outsource my manufacturing. Wow. Once we got through this experience, we shrunk the factory right back to probably about 10 machinists, yep. And we kept 7 factories busy. I had 7 factories that just carried on, and they were as happy as can be. You know, they were being kept busy, and we were effectively their design and their sales branch, and they were the manufacturing. So it was a win-win. A good thing came out of it. And
again, you pivoted and actually de-risk your business model from that point on, because then if something happened, then it's not your personal cost and the staff and salary and all of the hard costs that you were suffering. You can then manage that to suit the ebb and flow of the contracts that you're winning. So a fantastic outcome in that context. I know, again, from a bit of Google stalking, you ended up in a wheelchair at some stage. So tell me a bit about that.
So that was probably about 2 or 3 years after the factory burning. And I was very tired, and I really, really, really wanted to, I had got to a stage. We had a couple of incidences that I'd been shot at, being in factory. It's quite a dangerous environment. You're working in the heart of industry. It's the lowest income sort of surrounding, and we were held up at gunpoint at one time. We were shot at through the driveway. We had a little bit of a shootout, and bullets were flying. We all hit the deck, and bullets were going through the building. And this day in particular, I was really exhausted. I was fried. I just said, I had enough. I don't want to do this anymore. I was quite frazzled, and I thought, nah, I'm moving to Australia. Now this was probably about 25 years ago. We decided to move to Australia.
So you basically, I'm done here. This is too dangerous. I don't want to spend any time here. Well, why Australia, by the way? Why not the US or the UK or somewhere else?
When I was 18 and a half years old, I went hitchhiking around the world. I hitchhiked around the whole of Europe, and my mission was to find another country to go and live in. So I'd been to the US. No, sorry, I went to the US afterwards, but I traveled around Europe and the Mediterranean. I settled in Israel, and I ended up building yachts, believe it or not. I was a yacht builder. My father was a carpenter, and I learned a lot of carpentry from him. It's actually my hobby is carpentry. I love working with my hands. I worked as a carpenter in Israel for about 9 months. And I thought, nah, it's not the country for me. I was on a mission. I wanted to find another country to live in. I ended up in England, and I thought, England's lovely. I would love England with a lot of sunshine. Yeah. And that's when Australia was kind of implanted in my brain. I thought, I want to check out Australia. And I'd been doing research. Now, in the meantime, one of my brothers and my sister had moved to Australia in that time, and they were saying, come to Australia, come check it out. I had started doing some sort of contract work for my brother who was in Australia at the time. So I used to come here occasionally, and I thought, I like this place. I think I could do this. Anyway, that day in particular, that I ended up in a wheelchair, I decided I'm going to Australia and I don't care what it takes. And I hopped in my car, was driving home, and I got attacked on the way home. And being the little bulldog I am, I fought back. I got out and I attacked back. The sad fact of the story is I came off second best. Both my feet were broken in half completely. I couldn't walk. Somebody rushed me off to hospital. I spent I don't know how long in hospital. Long story short, I ended up in a wheelchair, couldn't walk, and I was totally disabled from the waist down. That was 3 years of my life where I had to learn to walk again. So I went to aquatherapy and whatever therapy was around at the time, and learned to walk, learned to run, learned to cycle. And it was, and a lot of people said to me, oh boy, that's it. Now she's out of here for sure. And I said, no, I'm going to stay here and I'm going to fight this war. I'm going to fight until it actually kills me. Yeah. Which was very interesting because I was running my business off a laptop out of my bed. And I had my driver that would come and fetch me. He'd pick me up, put me into my own delivery van, drive me to the factory. He'd put me in a wheelchair. I'd do a couple of hours work. I'd get tired. I had a little bench next to my desk. I would just roll over and go and sleep in my office. I'd wake up, carry on working, and my driver would carry me back to the delivery van, drive me back home, and that's what my life was for about a year or so thereafter, until I started learning to walk in there. And for me, it was just getting on with it. You know, it was the mission. So, Mish on a mission is, they call it.
I'm going to start calling you Mission from now on, I think, Mish, because everything I'm hearing, there's never say never in your lingo. You're a bit like my father-in-law. No was never an option. It was like, no, we're going to do this. It's just a matter of how. It's not about awareness. It's we're going to do this. And that singular focus, that laser-like commitment to making that happen, awe-inspiring. Very inspiring, Mish. I love that exercise. So talk us through then. You must have reached a breaking point that said, that's it, I'm out of here, I'm going to Australia. Talk us through that.
So that took a couple of years still. My sister, who had moved to Australia, decided to get married. And I was a little bit nose out of joint because she had her 50th birthday a year earlier and she didn't invite me. And I said, how can you do that? I said, I'm coming to your wedding. She said, but I haven't invited you. I said, I don't care, I'm coming. And she happened to be in Brisbane, which I had travelled through before, and I quite liked Brisbane. Yep. Anyway, and I arrived in Brisbane and I liked the weather and I liked the environment. And I just decided, I'm not going home. Never. That's it. I'm finished. I'm not going home. And I literally crossed my arms and said, that's it. I'm not going home. And my wife phoned me and said, hey, you coming home on Friday? I said, no, I'm sorry. I'm not coming home. And she was like, what are you talking about? I've got a 3-year-old on my lap and a 1-year-old on my lap. And I heard them burst into tears. They all started crying. And I thought, oh, what have I done? And I said, I'm sorry. I cannot. I'm over it. I'm finished. I want to start fresh. I want to start all over. I've put an application in. I am moving to Australia. I will give you every single cent I own. I will give you everything. I will leave South Africa with just the clothing on my back. I don't want anything, nothing. You can have every single little bit of wealth that I've built up. I am coming to Australia. But if there's one incident that happens to those kids, you will never, ever forgive yourself. And I've lived through it. And she was like, okay. Please come home. I said, I'm not coming home. I want to hear you say, yes, you're coming. Then I'll get onto a plane. And I didn't get onto the plane on Friday. She phoned me on Saturday morning. She said, I went to the airport and I said, I told you not to waste your time. She said, okay, yes, please, yes. Just come home, we'll discuss it. So I said to her, is that a yes? And she said, yes, we will discuss it. So it was blackmail. It was blackmail. And just fuming bad. I went home. We discussed it. I said, my application's in, the decision is made. I'm moving, whether you come with me or not. You're going to regret it if you don't. And we're incredibly close. We're a really very, we work so incredibly well together. And the decision was made. That's how we came to Australia. And I had 27 days to be on Australian soil.
But why 27 days, by the way? What drove that decision?
The visa expired at the age of 48. And it was in the January, just prior to my birthday. So I had to be in Australia, employed, working before my birthday. Wow. And that's how tight it was.
Incredible. Sorry, go on.
The Australian government gave me 30 days to go home, pack up and come back here. So we literally packed up our entire lives in 30 days. It was crazy. You can't see the grey hairs now, but let me just tell you, I went grey overnight.
You hide it very well then, Mish. There's no doubt about it. So, and that brings us pretty much full circle to where you started off with landing here in Australia. What, 2013 was it roughly, from memory?
End of 2013. Yep. It was right about. It was September 2013, and then I had to go back and forward a couple of times, and eventually it was end of September, sort of. Yeah.
Now, again, I'm guessing here, but and maybe you're able to leverage off your portfolio in South Africa to actually get into commercial property here in Australia. I can sort of understand why you would look at the yield potential of commercial, given you've done commercial in South Africa, so it wasn't a completely foreign language to you in that regard. Can you talk, because for most people early on in the journey, having the deposits and the ability to actually get into commercial can be a challenge. Talk us through that one.
That was a joke. That's actually a joke. So, and the reason I say it's a joke is, Bushy, effectively, I had set my life up when I made the decision to go into business and to buy real estate in my early 20s. I had set a date and said, right, I'm going to retire at 45. Right. I pretty much did retire at 45 in South Africa with my factories going, and I used to work maybe 3-4 hours a day. Okay. I would be there in body, but I was doing other things. I was dabbling in property. I was playing around with all sorts of other things. So life was creamy and dreamy. We had everything that opened and shut, and we had the holiday houses and the cars and the boats and all the toys. Okay. Yeah. And it was a real fall from grace, because when I realized what it would mean is that I could only bring out 8% of the value of my money to Australia.
Why?
The exchange was 1 to 12. And then if you throw in all the commissions and the bank fees and all of that, so by the time we arrived here, we arrived with nothing, literally nothing. And plus being a foreigner, the best loan that I could get was a 20% loan. So I had to pay 80% of any property that I was going to be buying.
Yeah.
It was a double whammy. Okay. And I thought, well, I'm just going to suck this up and we're going to eat bread and water. You laugh about it. Literally, we lived off the back of till slips. You know, in the back of till slips of Coles, they say two pizzas for the price of one. Right. or buy one get one free. We lived like that for about 3 years. We were living off the back of till slips. Every single special that we could find, we when we moved here, we had nothing. We had no furniture. We had this. I bought a little house because I don't like renting. I hate renting. So I thought, no, I'm gonna find a house. And I Mish on a mission. We saw over 100 houses in 4 weeks. We visited every single house that came on the market, and I was speaking to agents and everything. And we found this one little house, and I thought this house got potential. We moved in there. We didn't have a single fork or a spoon. We were living on paper plates, and we were sleeping on the floor on blow-up mattresses for 2 months in the middle of winter. With the westerly winds blowing right through the floorboards.
Amazing. Again, most people wouldn't put themselves through that. They wouldn't be able to make that sacrifice for a new vision, because knowing you now in what you've shared, you would have had a very clear vision pretty early on where you were heading when you arrived here in Australia. You don't strike me as someone who's just going to make it up as you go along. Yes, you might be a bit impetuous and say, right, I'm not going back, I'm staying here. But I'm guessing that there was something in your back of your mind. What was that? And then, given those challenges you had and the hurdles that you often need to jump to get into commercial, talk to us about how I became that.
Look, I knew that I was going to go into business because I think I've gone beyond being able to work for a boss. You know, I haven't had a boss most of my life. Yeah. And so I knew I was going to go into business, and I was on a mission to find a business. I was looking at various different options, and I bumped into, I was chatting to somebody at one stage who said to me, what about commercial real estate? And I said, yeah, but, I'm not really, I can't see myself selling commercial real estate. And a lot of people had started asking me about how I had replaced my income. And I was saying, well, commercial real estate. And this friend of mine said to me, well, have you heard of a buyer's agent? And I said, not really. What is a buyer's agent? And she said, you basically buy properties for people who want to do what you've done. And I said, okay, that kind of makes sense because I know how to do this. All right, let's check it out. And that's how it was born into the start of the journey. And those people that were asking me to help them, I thought, well, I'm already doing that. I'm kind of showing them. Why not put a price tag on it? Put a value on it. And I got to tell you, when I first started, I was doing it for nothing, as cheap as chips, because there was a little bit of insecurity. I kind of felt I don't know enough about the Australian market. I'm a foreigner here. What are people going to say? What are they going to think? Are they going to tall poppy me? I don't want to be a tall poppy. So the first couple of deals that I did for my clients, man, they scored. I can say I put $20,000 worth of value into what they were getting for half the price.
Yeah, I love that. Circling back, though, I guess I'm still intrigued by, given that clearly it was pretty tight when you hit the deck here, how were you able to get your keys on your first commercial property? Yeah, personally, how did you make that happen?
Leverage. So getting money out of South Africa took 6 years. So it took us 6 years to get all our money out of South Africa. And every time I got a little chunk out, we were getting our money out in whatever possible way we could, in a couple of creative ways. I cannot mention that on.
Sure. Good again. Yep.
Yes. And every time I got those little chunks, I would save just enough, or I knew that I had just enough to go and leverage. And buying commercial real estate as a foreigner is a no-brainer. There are no limitations on it. Now, this is something that I didn't know, and I learned very fast. Had I wanted to buy investment residential properties, I'd be handcuffed. I couldn't do it. And I was thinking, how are people doing this? When I looked in commercial, I thought, oh, hang on, wait a minute. There's a wide open door here. You can buy as many commercial properties as you like as a foreigner. I thought, there we go. Ka-ching, boom, off we went. So I bought my first property. It was $650,000. I negotiated it. You're going to love this. I negotiated down to 505,000.
Wow.
Okay. Using a couple of skillful skills that I had learned in my previous life. Yeah. I still own that property today, and that property is probably worth about $1 million today.
Yep.
Kept it, waited for a little bit more money to come in, did the next one, did the same thing, and then by the time we got to, because I bought 3 in that 1 year, pretty much, I just started churning them over. So leveraging and buying another one.
Love it. I mean, sitting and listening to this, there's pretty much nothing that you can't turn your hand to, is what I'm hearing very clearly. But what, if anything, do you struggle with, Mish?
Believe it or not, sometimes I struggle with my own self-esteem.
Really?
Yeah. It's it's like when I landed up in the wheelchair, I kind of felt as if I wasn't good enough to go back to my clients. And my clients were saying, Mish, come and see us. We'll help you. Bring the wheelchair. You've got to be in there. It doesn't matter. But it was a little bit of self-esteem I was a little bit shattered. Wow. So coming to Australia, I guess it was that little bump of self-esteem as well that I didn't know enough. Fun fact, I have done everybody's course and courses in real estate and investing, and for the first, I'd say 4 years that I was here, I just plowed my brain with study, with strategies, with how to. The strategies are pretty much the same as what we do at home, except there's a lot of red tape.
Yep.
So rules and regulations, and it was the rules and regulations that I had to learn about the can and the can'ts. So that's what I did. And I've never stopped. I've actually never stopped. Every single day, I plug my ears with information, and I'm learning from other countries, from other people, and it's across a wide range of topics. So,
yeah, you sound. I'm nodding my head because you're sounding very much like me. I'm just so curious and always want to learn. I can't help myself. It's almost an addiction for me, actually. Yeah, and having this podcast, having the great privilege to talk to people like you and learn from your experience and take that on board as part of the ongoing crucible of my own experience is there's nothing better from my perspective. So I'd love for you to, and again, knowing how creative you are, paint us a little bit of a picture about what the end game looks like for you in terms of lifestyle and what's going to be your ongoing investment strategy to sustain that moving forward.
Look, my strategy to start with has always been I love ugly. So my payoff line at home was always, I love ugly. Give me ugly and I'll turn it into something beautiful. I'll turn it into money. And I used to do this with everything. I'm very good with my hands, and I was very good with building. And there's another little chapter of my life. I love motorbikes and bicycles. So I used to build. When I couldn't afford to buy my own, I would buy a trashed motorbike, strip it apart and put it back together again and spray it up and made it look beautiful, sell it and buy another one. Anyway, so I adapted that strategy to real estate as well.
Yeah.
So I would buy these funny little homes, these funny little places. I'd apply my recipe, which was opening them up, making them look beautiful, but then I kept them. And the strategy, I guess, going forward is, a lot of people say flip properties. Well, yeah, there's money to be made in flipping, but I believe that accumulation is king.
Yeah.
So if you're accumulating, you have bricks and mortar, you have land, you have something that has got value. Build it up, pay down as much as you can. When you want to do your next property, leverage, pull out as much as you can and put it into your next property and buy a bigger and a better one. So that's pretty much the strategy that we've been doing and that I've been doing for the last 10 years, as much as possible.
Yeah, I love it. And in this country, as you would well know, given that the tax office likes to get their their hands on as much as they possibly can. If you're in that flipping exercise, you're giving most of your gains back to the tax office. Whereas if you're holding it and leveraging it, you're building your wealth, you're creating cash flow, multiple income streams, and you've got the ability to keep doing it. So it makes perfect sense. If we were to circle back and we mentioned this off air before we get on board, but if you were starting out again, what, if anything, would you invest in differently, Mish?
I would do it all again. I would do it exactly the same. I think the strategy that I've learned over the years, and for me, it's been rinse and repeat. I would do exactly the same. And I think I was probably old enough in my life to realize that recipe worked, to continue doing what I'm doing. So, I would love to be doing the same thing in Australia in my early mid-20s. I would love to have had my portfolio of 29 properties on Australian soil. So that I didn't have to pay that bitter pill of moving countries.
Again, here's the thing. What I love about what you've shared with us is that because that's become a driver, that the fact that you've had to do it again, you've got the need and the inspiration to make it happen, and the energy that you need to apply to that, and the resilience to keep doing it until that eventuates. So it's, I think many of us live, particularly in Australia, we are, I think, we're the luckiest country in the world, and I've travelled a fair bit, and I keep saying, yeah, we've got it good here. But so many Australians have got it so good, and they're so comfortable that drive and the need to actually extend themselves to do something better rather than just what they've got isn't there. So that's why I love talking to people like yourself who've grabbed it by the horns and have at times in your life had to do it, and that then becomes part of who you are. So you're able to keep doing it because that just becomes the habit and the habitual way that you look at life and the way you tackle life. So absolutely love your story. Really appreciate you taking us through that. I'm now going to switch into the first of our ambush rounds, Mish, where I'm going to give you a blindfold and cigarette and ask a couple of quick questions that the listeners always want to gain your words of wisdom on. And the first of those is if you could have a coffee or a cup of tea or a drink with anyone, either alive or dead, who would you choose and why?
I would say Anthony Robbins has always been one of my greatest go-tos. When I'm down, I like to just plug in some Anthony Robbins, and there's so much energy in his voice. There's just so much wisdom and experience. Now Anthony Robbins is probably pretty much the same age as I'm, probably a little bit older. And I look at what he's done with his life, and man, I think he's the most amazing guy because he's given us a full gestalt of positive brain power, upliftment, finance, investing, and he continues to motivate people with just pure passion and words.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of seeing him live in Alice Springs. I used to live in Alice Springs many years ago, back in the day, so I was an architect, and he came to town and we spent a day with Anthony Robbins, and it was just amazing, actually. Yeah, I mean, he's good listening to him remotely, but in the flesh, it takes it to another level. And I remember punching the air after spending that time with him because he just gave you that level of self-belief and self-confidence to go out there and make things happen. So, great suggestion. Changing tack a little bit, what superpower do you wish you had and why?
Oh, this is a beaut. I wish I had the power to manipulate time. I wish I could go into a time capsule and go back with the same knowledge and do it all again and just do it quicker, faster, better. Can you imagine?
Oh, unbelievable. I would love to have that power. You picked an absolute cracker. On a slightly different tack again, if you could wave a magic wand and change anything, Mish, what would you change about investing, if anything?
Look, I think with that magic wand, if I was ever given one of those magic wands, I think the flick of the wrist would be to learn all lucrative investing, all strategies of lucrative investing, and have it implanted in my brain in a process of osmosis. that I could just wake up one morning and bing, I know it all.
I love that. Last question, Elise. What would be the title of the book about you?
Interesting question there, because I'm actually busy writing a book at the moment, but it's not about me. It's more about commercial real estate. Yeah. But I think if the book was about me, which maybe that will be my second book, I think I would probably call it Invest, Travel, Learn, and Grow.
Love it. I would call it Mish on a Mission, because it's absolutely crystal clear to me that that's a massive part of who you are and why you've achieved so much in your life today. Love all that. Before we close off on part one, what's sort of one final thought that you'd want to leave our listeners with based on your journey so far?
If you're thinking about doing it, stop thinking and do it. Because if you're standing on the platform and you don't get on the train, you're going to miss all those opportunities going past you. Just do it. You know, when you, and it's like all of those missions. You know, I got these creative ideas and I just went on a mission and I didn't know how to do them. I just created them as I went along, and people came into my life and helped me along with it. So if you're thinking about it, just do it. The right things will happen.
Love that. Look, I really want to thank you for taking the time to share the ins and outs of your quite awe-inspiring personal journey, Mish. And before we close off, if anyone would like to explore this inspiration and information further with other like-minded investors in a very safe, relaxed and no-pressure environment, join us on the Facebook collective group, the Property Hub Collective, by clicking the link in the show notes. And we look forward to connecting with you and further continuing the conversation there. We now look forward to continuing our deep dive chat with Mish in next week's episode, where we're going to unpack the whys and wherefores of all things commercial property. So we look forward to seeing you again then, Mish.
Thank you, Bushy. It's been great chatting to you. It's been a lot of fun speaking to you. Thank you.
Stay tuned for part 2 of this interview next episode.
Thanks for tuning in to Get Invested on the Property Hub podcast channel, your home for property investment insights and inspiration. And don't leave yet until you've taken the next step towards living by design by getting my award-winning book, Get Invested, absolutely free when you sign up at knowhowproperty.com.au or bushymartin.com.au. And finally, make sure you subscribe to Property Hub to get your weekly dose of Get Invested inspiration, along with every episode of Realty Talk, Australia's leading property show for red-hot property investing news and insights, direct from industry leaders and influencers. Remember to always get invested in your knowledge, and I look forward to seeing you next time.